What's up, y'all? It's Dr. Paul with Liberty Hill Comics, episode 51 of the Comic Book Conservators live show. We got a special guest today. I'm super excited. I think we had a great show for you. Somebody that I've known about and looked up to and has made tremendous contributions to our hobby. So welcome, Chris Trump. How are you?
Hey, Chris.
I'm good. Hi, guys. Glad to be on the show.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. Why don't you start today and introduce yourself to everybody and let them know where they can find you.
Well, I'm Chris Trump, and you can find me at the _Pressmaster and on Instagram. And I'm also in the obviously the conservation community page in Facebook. And that's it for now. Eventually we'll get the Pressmaster website working. I had to fire my webmaster. He didn't do a good job, so I'm gonna have to find somebody to replace me.
Right. I got
probably
it.
already been there. I guess we'll find out tonight. But I've been loving comics since the 70s. So
Yeah.
that's a decade that's far past.
Right. Yeah. Well, I am really glad to have you on the show. I think we have a very exciting show tonight. As usual, we have a new guest. We do their origin story. So we're going to get to hear all about Chris's introduction to comic books and the hobby, and then evolution into cleaning and pressing. And as I alluded to before, major contributions to our hobby. Contributions that have really rocked our whole hobby, CGC, slabbing, the industry. So looking forward to talking about that. Before we get into it, I'd like to say hi to my co-hosts, Phil, Phantom Restoration. Say hi to everybody.
Hey, everybody. Phil here, Phantom Restoration, coming to you live, as always, from the border of Brooklyn and Queens here in New York City. You can find me on Instagram at Phantom Restoration or at the website right beneath my name here. And happy to be here as always. And it's nice to meet you here kind of virtually, Chris, for the first time. Great to have you on.
Thanks, Phil.
Awesome. Captain Larry, not in California. Again,
I am not in California. I am, I would say broadcasting normally from home would be great, but I am on the road again. It is early morning here in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and I'm happy to join you guys. You can find me on flyinglcomics.com, and you could reach out to me most easily on Instagram, also under the same name. And I'm also on Facebook. So happy to be here. Happy to be here with our guest, Chris. I can't wait to hear about everything.
So he could be in a hash bar, but he's here with us. So that's how important we are.
Well, they did stock my mini fridge with Heineken. So, well.
Nice.
Can't complain.
Before we get started, a couple more just little housekeeping things. Book's doing great. A lot of people reached out. Everybody should have it now if you were in the Kickstarter, even if you were overseas, I believe. If not, let us know. Thank you to my co-author, Shelby, who's done an amazing job getting those out to everybody. Also, we mentioned last week that we were on the cusp of 500 members for our comic book conservation community on Facebook. We blew through that this week. So I just want to thank everybody who's participating there and contributing and moderating and all the experts. Just great camaraderie. And I really appreciate everybody there. So thank you. While we're doing thank yous and appreciations, this episode, if you're watching it live, you're watching it advertisement free. Thanks to Salesboy Comics, Don Carter, and Collecting Chaos. Anybody who wants to sponsor next episode can just hit that super chat button and we'll call you out. Really enjoy Salesboy Comics YouTube channel. It's just very entertaining. So if you're not checking him out, along with the professor and obviously Captain Larry and all Jason's YouTube channel, and all the other folks that are contributing. Please check them out. Not to mention Jerry the Jitterbug, who's always entertaining, and I'm getting a really having a good time watching him sort of try to wrap up that Tech 33 that he's working on. Very early.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
Yeah. So thank you all. Let's say hi to everybody. Robbie Josephs is here. Thank you for joining. Thank you for the kind words. My co-author, my aforementioned co-author Shelby is here of Shelby's Comics. My buddy Hugo Danner, Mike, what's up? Nice to chat with you this week. Ben Stewart, as usual. Rick Nestor says hello from the Great White North. We have a lot of folks from Canada logging in and participating in the community, and I just want to say I appreciate all of y'all. Don Carter's here as usual, collecting chaos. The aforementioned Professor Peter Lachey, check out his channel Experiments in Conservation if you haven't already. The aforementioned Jason Adrift, Archivist Adrift is his channel here on YouTube. Check that out if you haven't already. AG, longtime supporter of the channel. Thank you so much for being here. And Ben says he did get his book. That's awesome. USPS lost one book. I thought it got found. Well, we'll find out about that as the show goes, I imagine. Eric Conyers is here. Welcome. Recognize that name. Blue Garland, hi from Brooklyn. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you here. So, as I said, when we have somebody on new to the show, we usually start with their origin story. I just think it's a lot of fun. We started episode 1 of this show with we 3 origin stories. And so we're going to continue that tradition. And then we have 2 additional parts. One is a look back at Chris's contributions to our hobby in blue LED photo bleaching. And the other is a launch of a brand new product that he's been developing and that we're super excited to talk about. I have tried it. It's amazing. And so if that sounds like fun, stick around, but we're going to jump right into the origin story.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah. Take it away. And yeah, just let me know when you want the next slide.
Yeah, go ahead. Next slide.
Oh, I meant like, once I finish drinking.
Oh, okay. It's your show. You take your time. Well, as we said at the top, I'm Chris Trump. Grew up in southwestern PA, about 40 minutes south of Pittsburgh. And 1975 was my introduction to comics and other things, but that was when I started. So go ahead, Paul. All right. So it was fall of 70. You're laughing at the thing. Okay. It's fall of 75. That's when I got my first comic. It was a Fantastic Four 165, which was, I can visualize the cover, and I was 9 years old when I got that. I got it. My mother drugged me to the grocery store, a local grocery store, and I didn't really have much of a choice. I was the young one in the house, youngest of 4. So I got drugged wherever mom wanted to go. So that was when I first remember seeing a spinner rack. And it was loaded full of comics. And, I was kind of like, I want to go over there. Can I go over there? And she says, yeah, go look. And so, I looked at a number of books, and this was the one that kind of stuck out at me. I just remember the Thing fighting the Crusader on the cover. And to answer a question, Paul, that you asked in one of your other videos, it was 25 cents.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was my first. That was the dollar price of the first comic that I ever got.
There was a lot of inflation at that time because 4 years later you were paying double that. 3 years later, I think you were paying double that.
Yeah. Still
that spinner rack was such magic, right? Hey Kids Comics. What happened when my brother and I were there was we would see it and we would both just start sprinting for it, and we would both grab that rack and we'd be trying to turn it different ways because we were basically both hunting for this month's X-Men Because whoever snatched it first could get it, right?
Right.
And whoever didn't had to get something else. And it was off to the races when we saw that rack. Man, that was magical.
Yeah, no, it certainly was. Well, the Thing has always been my favorite character. It was the first hero that I saw, and always been my favorite. That picture there is actually this.
Oh wow!
Which is
I'm
actually
gonna
hand drew it.
Keep it up.
And
look at this, people.
And put the and cut the yarn that was used to create this.
That is insane. How old were you when you did this, Chris?
I don't remember. I was probably 13 or 14.
Wow.
But this is what the back looks like. You can see kind of where did you kind of draw the face? And can anybody tell me, is this a like a Ron Wilson thing head, or is this the one from the box?
I don't know. You tell me. You're the expert on the thing.
I think it's Ron Wilson, or it could be Rich Buckler, one of those guys that was.
I would I could see.
It was probably this. I think it was 70s. So anyway.
Before we move on, thank you,
Yeah.
AG, for the super chat. Super appreciate it. Very generous of you. Next episode is on AG, everybody. Say thanks in the chat.
Good. Well, you can flip to the next slide.
Absolutely. That's amazing that you still have that.
Yep. This is one of 4 that I have. I have a 9.4 that I actually got as an 8.0 off of eBay, and then I have 9.6 that somebody friend.
I remember that book.
Yeah.
Wow.
You remember the first page?
No, I don't.
The first page is Reed Richards, and his body is above the skyline, but his legs are stretched down into the ground. He's basically walking with really long legs to the skyline, which is not something you would think would be humanly possible, even with his legs, because of the sheer amount of buildings that are in New York City.
Right. They were,
now this is the book that we're talking about. The one.
Yep.
Your
this is
favorite.
the actual one he picked
So
out
you
of the
you still hung on to it.
Yep.
Good
I
for you.
haven't cleaned it or pressed it either. I debated doing it several times. But you can look at the back cover. That's a little small on the screen, but it's filthy.
Yeah,
My
it's
OCBI
it's
goes to
filthy.
Chris,
Yeah,
I know
all
a guy that can help you with that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I know a guy too. You know.
It doesn't need restored yet, but I think it soon might if I actually keep it out of the bag. But
No,
yeah,
that's
it's.
great.
I
I'm
don't know if
leave
you
it
guys
the way
still
it
have your
is.
first comic?
So I kind of have my first comic. I have my first comic that I bought intentionally. There were a few comic books in our house from when we were little that my brother and I didn't really pay attention to, and I actually don't know where they came from. I don't know if an uncle threw them at us or a cousin left them at our house. I just don't. So there's a few like that. As a matter of fact, I still have those too. Yeah, I definitely have those, and I have my intentional first comics. I can remember very vividly when we considered ourselves comic book collectors. So we went from having a few random comics in the house.
Right.
They were like, again, cousins or somebody. And then I think my mom bought, or somebody gave us one of those 3-packs of Marvel comics that were kind of, overstock, right? That they were just jamming in those 3-packs. Funny enough, one of them was X-Men 129. And we still have that. My brother has that one, but that's obviously the first appearance of Kitty Pryde,
Right.
and the White Queen. And we have the one that came in that multi-pack. But I very vividly remember when we decided we were comic book collectors, and we were like serious, and we were organizing our comic books in a box.
Right.
Of course, I didn't have a comic box. I actually when you went to the grocery store, they would ask you, do you want some boxes? Absolutely want some boxes. Came home with some boxes, tested them all out. The box that was the perfect, or the closest to the perfect size for my comics, was a box of Stolies. It was like a case of 6/5 of Stolies vodka.
The original comic box.
That was the original comic book box for little Paul. And I very vividly remember like the 11th comic that I had, because now I'm counting them because I'm a collector. I'm very serious. I remember it was New Teen Titans. I think it was New Teen Titans number 11. It's the one where they fight Hyperion. And I still have that book too. So the answer is yes. I don't know if Phil or Captain Larry want to tell their stories.
Well, the thing is I have a similar story to Chris. I remember, I had an older brother who was into comic books. He's 6 years older than me. So I got into it. I got drug into it when I was about 4 years old. Mom would give us each $1 to go buy comics. And we should be doing grocery shopping. We had the comic rack. But yeah, I remember 12-cent comics, guys. I'm sorry, I'm old. But I remember that. That was how we started. And we would read them to death. It would be up at our family cabin, and there was no power or anything. So we were just like, we got the Coleman lantern out and we were reading comic books late at night. I mean, that's how the collection started. Unfortunately, those comics got eaten by mice because we left them up there at the cabin. But similar story to me.
Yep. Yeah, I remember 12-cent comics too, Larry. They're called back issues.
I'm in such a different category. Like my first comics were like, I think $1.75, and like as a kid, you're just, it's all relative. It still seems
right.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Well, those are some great memories. I'll tell you one other thing specifically about Fantastic Four and sort of pre-comic time. We also had a Fantastic Four Big Little book.
Oh yeah.
And a couple other things like that around the house. So even before we were collecting comic books, we were kind of familiar with some of the characters and had some of the material in the house. Yeah,
one of the Fantastic
Thanks,
Four
Mom.
Yeah, exactly. This is how I knew it was the first book, Larry. Mom put my name in it. Mom was the enabler. She's the one that got me all the comics. She would just come on with a small stack of books. She didn't know what she was buying. I mean, it was like Superman Family and things of that like. But it was like I didn't care. I mean, I was able to read another comic that I hadn't seen before.
Absolutely.
Thankfully, my mom actually read comic books as well, so that was kind of a treat.
I think my mom did too, but she just didn't let me see it.
Yeah.
But she did write my name. I still have several books that have my name inside the cover. She did not write it on the cover, so she was savvy enough to not do that. But she did write it on a couple of books, and I thought this one had it in it. And when I pulled out to take the picture of it, I saw that it was in there, so I had to take a picture of it.
That's awesome.
Go ahead. Well, the other influence at that time was Saturday morning cartoons and even after school cartoons. I remember, getting you home and I think it was like 3 or 3:30 or something like that would. You would kick off, and usually it's like Speed Racer or something like that was on in the afternoon.
I remember Speed Racer.
Yeah, I was just going through some of the lists, and I mean, I could have made this thing super long, but basically, it was for Saturday mornings. It was mostly like Flintstones, Bugs Bunny, Scooby Doo, not Scrappy Doo, Spider-Man, obviously. And when they went to syndication, most of those shows were done in the '60s, late '60s. And they went into syndication in the 70s, so you're able to actually see them again for the first time, in the 70s for people like me. But I ended up gravitating to, as I got a little older, to some of the more like the fantasy and adventure type shows like Speed Racer and Ultraman and Star Blazer.
Ultraman, God, I remember Ultraman. I loved Ultraman.
Yeah, I'll tell you a funny story. My mom looked at me one day. She said, "What are you doing?" I grabbed the toilet paper roll. It was silver in our house, and I would go around the house squeezing it as if I was going to turn into Ultraman.
Okay, that's a good visual for me.
Because I think the character had, I think it was silver. At least it was silver to me. And it was just like a cylinder that the person would touch. So, anyway, this is actually the Speed Racer. I actually bought this set. This was the full set of the first season or first series or whatever to show my kids, and they loved it.
Awesome.
Nice.
So
Yeah,
we
for
went through
me-
the whole 5 seasons.
For us, Saturday morning cartoons were the thing. And we actually got to spend the night, like we would do a sleepover on our own living room floor, my brother and I. We would get to sleep in sleeping bags on the living room floor so that we could
Yeah.
wake up and turn the TV on on Saturday morning. And I remember, do you remember Herculoids?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I loved
that one,
Herculoids.
yeah.
That was an early one that I remember.
I
And
love
then,
that
of course, a little bit younger than you guys, Dungeons and Dragons was a great cartoon.
right.
Thunder the
Facebook?
Barbarian was amazing, and I've watched that again with my kids, and
Right.
it holds up pretty well.
Mhm. I don't know if did you ever catch Space Ghost when it was on?
So oddly, I grew up in the country. I live in the country now. I grew up in the country. We had 3 channels.
Right.
We didn't have
What did I-
cable, and Space Ghost seemed to be like a host who would talk a little bit between cartoons or something. But I don't actually
That was-
remember watching
Yeah.
Space Ghost
Yeah,
cartoons.
that
Yeah,
was
I don't
later
either.
actually.
Yeah,
Space Coast,
Cartoon
Coast to Coast.
well,
Yeah.
it makes
Yeah.
sense. It was later.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was when basically it went to late night.
Adult Swim. Yeah.
Adult Swim, yeah.
Yeah.
So I never watched it as a kid, really.
The Adult
Yeah.
Swim is, I mean, the originals are awesome too, and the Adult Swim revamps are pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah.
So I mean, we could spend hours
Right.
talking.
Yeah.
About the
We should move on. Yeah.
This is a
Pies.
little interesting aside. I was in 1980. I was 14 years old. I'd just gotten a paper route. I had a friend of mine who had a paper route, and I was envious of him because he would pay for his comics with money he made from his paper route. And those of you that don't know what a paperboy is,
I was just going to say, some of them may not know.
right? So basically, as I put in here, I was an independent reseller of daily news. So basically, I bought the newspapers, and I had a punch card that I'd walk around, and I had about 50 or so customers, to my recollection. And every week, I would go and collect whatever the $1.10 was for the
Mhm.
for the week, including the Sunday paper, which was always 3 times the size of a daily paper. And I would deliver them in the morning on my bike, and I would come back home and have breakfast and go to school. And then, when I go to collect, I would take the money. I go down to the Herald Standard office. That's where the paper was, and pay for the newspapers. And then whatever I had left, I'd ride my bike over to the little candy confectionery store. That actually, interesting enough, the owner passed away a few years ago. He was 107 when he passed away.
Wow.
Whoa,
His son who
him.
took over was 91 when he passed away. So this
Yeah,
was in the
fruit pies
family for a
every day.
long time.
Wow.
But it was it was right at the end of kind of end of town. Actually, it was like the last building before it kind of went out to the to the country. But anyway, I would go in there. They'd have the comics in the corner. They'd have a spinner rack over there. So I'd go and look through some of the books. I'd grab a stack, and I'd go in the back of the store where they had the refrigerators and some of the other treats. And I would usually, it was a Hostess pie or a Suzy Q, which is another Hostess treat, and some chocolate milk, because we actually had a dairy in town that actually was not far from where I lived. I could actually hear the trucks entering at night to get loaded up for the morning
Perfect.
morning runs. My sister would always complain about the trucks at Fikes Dairy making too much noise at night because her bedroom was closest to the dairy. But so they, I got chocolate milk and sat at the bar where they did their soda fountain and would flip through the comics. And I do not remember finding any chocolate on any comics that I've done that I've had at that point. So that was my nasty habit, was eating while reading comics.
Guilty as charged.
Right. Oh, all of us.
I have cleaned a few books that had chocolate on the covers, though, that people have fully admitted. Go ahead, Paul.
My dad used ours
Yeah.
as coasters, comic books. Those make a good coaster, protect the table.
I did Giant Size X-Men #1 that a brother used it as a coaster for a Reese's cup.
cookbook.
Ouch. Ow.
Now, I got most of the chocolate out, I'll have to show you the pictures of it. It came out pretty good, actually.
That's
Fiona was
amazing.
happy. All right. Well, the 80s were over. Then came the 90s. That was short-lived for me. For comics, I think I went till middle of the road, and then it was 26 years later that I finally came back up and started looking at comics again. But we'll go through it here. Starting with the next slide. So 80s. I graduated high school in 84. So I was doing a lot of things in the early 80s, and I was still collecting comics, but I was starting to do other things, like, I was playing Dungeons and Dragons with friends who also collected comics as well.
Mm-hmm.
Painting miniatures, this is one of the miniatures that I painted. This is a Lord Soth. He's a anti-paladin.
Yeah. Was this from the Ralpartha line or the Grenadier line?
This was Ralpartha.
Ralpartha. It looks like Ralpartha. Yeah.
Yeah, this was part of the Ravenloft set that came out from TSR.
Mm-hmm. I love those Grenadier boxed kits. Those were tops for me.
Yeah. I have a bunch of lead figures that probably would be enough to poison somebody, but we got a box that has a bunch of lead figures that we would throw the paints out and the brushes, and everybody would just kind of grab a figure and start painting. And later, probably in the 90s, I was still playing AD&D with some older friends, and we actually used the hex pads and did our adventures on wrote them out with erasable markers, and that was pretty cool. So we used some of the painted miniatures for that. But with the way comics are going, it wasn't going to be long before I stopped. But the 80s also meant graduating, going to school after high school, eventually moving to Northern Virginia and getting married. So everybody faces that. I don't know how people actually continue to collect comics when they're in that phase of life, but good for them if they can still do it.
It's tough. Yeah. I definitely took some breaks in those periods. Yeah. I was fortunate enough to have a full fellowship when I was in grad school, and was self-sufficient and was able to start buying again when I was in grad school. So my gap, it was not too great. Then I had another gap when my girls were really young.
Yeah.
But I'm okay. Having missed out of most modern comics doesn't bother me. So, I mean, not that they aren't great. I just, you got to draw a line somewhere. You can't own everything.
Yep.
Why don't we just check in and see who else has joined us?
Yeah, I was just looking at the comments just now.
Sales Boy's here. Welcome, Sales Boy. We gave you a plug earlier. Paul Bales is here. Chris' origin story is a lot like mine about my first comic at the age of 9 at my local 7-Eleven. Man, the 7-Elevens were great. That was one of our go-tos. This was before comic shops for us. Fantastic Four 149. That's awesome. Lots of thanks for AG from the rest of the crew. Gorilla Monkey 3000, welcome. How are you? Collecting Chaos is here. We mentioned you earlier. Thank you for sponsoring this episode. I was devastated when the price of comics went up. I could no longer get 2 comics and a small Slurpee with my quarter.
Yeah.
Holy moly. I guess inflation.
Yeah.
Well, I still remember going to my very first comic shop. We didn't have comic shops.
No.
We had the grocery store. And going to a shop, they actually sold comics. That's all they did. That was amazing to me.
Yeah. Yeah. The closest one to us when we were growing up, one opened up in Saginaw, Michigan. And it wasn't that far away. It was like, I don't know, 45 minutes, maybe a little longer. But we would have to talk our parents into carpooling and taking 4, 5, 6 kids because no parents wanted to just drive there and sit while you were in the musty comics for an hour or longer.
I love when they ask, how long are you going to be? I'm like,
However long it
depends on how big the shop is.
Rick, Shelby's in the chat, so maybe you guys can work out in the chat. It looks like you don't have your signed hardcover. Hopefully you guys can work that out in the chat. Hugo Danner is jealous of the date stamp on your Hostess pie. Maybe
That wasn't my
date
picture.
stamp.
That was someone from the web.
I mean, you could pretend that it was yours, and you
No,
could
I could-
agree to press it
That
and
would
send
be,
it
that
to
would be
him.
nasty.
Gabe Gandara is here and says, "Can you ask Chris who will be the starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers next year?" I can
boy.
ask him that. I just did.
Yeah. Oh boy. Gosh, I don't know. I don't think it's going to be the guy from Green Bay. You know, that guy who beat them in the Super Bowl. No,
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be.
because he wants too much money. Yeah.
Rick
It's-
says the comic shop in Vancouver, June 1974. That's an early an
Nice.
early comic shop for sure.
Yeah.
And Sales Boy, thank you for the super chat. Once again, very consistently supporting the channel. I really appreciate it. And like I said before, go check out his channel. Always entertaining.
Speaking of comic shops, probably the biggest comic shop that I can remember at the time was Ide's Comic Shop in Pittsburgh. And it was there for a very long time. It's still there, but it was in downtown Pittsburgh. Man, you walk in there and it's just the smell of comics and your head just starts to spin. You know, it's like, where do I go first?
Those old great shops, man.
Yeah. Well,
In the books that were available to us then, the material that was there. I actually, speaking of, and we mentioned Jerry the Jitterbug earlier. He went to a con recently and posted his finds and had a copy of FF52. I bought my first copy of FF52 for like $2.50.
Yeah.
Like it's low grade, but I still have it. And man, the material that was available to us then.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, just look at any book and you look at the ads in them where they say, what the cost of the book is, and it's like, it's like, it's $15 for an FF1.
Well, they were also sketchy because they said they were mint too, or near mint.
Well, true. Yeah.
That was for sure not
idea.
true.
No idea the real condition.
Let's do just one very brief continued sidetrack before we get back to your deck here. Knights of Old, welcome to the show, says first Magic card. My first set was the Dark. That's when I started. So I think that's the third expansion. And they had just dropped, or were just about to drop, Revised. So we still had dual lands, but the Power 9 were gone because Unlimited was out of print. And I unless anybody else wants to jump in with Magic the Gathering, we should leave it at that and move on, because that could be a whole
I
nother
was there
show.
for it. I didn't partake.
Neither did I.
I went to Gen Con for 7 years straight in the 80s.
Oh, wow.
And that was a heck of a lot of fun.
And that's where they launched Magic the Gathering.
Yep.
Yeah, at Gen Con.
Actually, 20 through 25, Gen Con 20 through 25, I think, were the ones that I went to. And I went to Origins the one year when it was 20, I think, which was in Baltimore at that time. Those were the biggest gaming cons that there were. So
Knights of Old says mine was Unlimited. That's why you're Knights of Old and I'm like I'm Knights of Middle Age. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. So eventually we reached the 90s, and that's when I moved to Northern Virginia, and it was there were a lot of good comic shops there. I found one that was had pull lists, and you could go in and just kind of walk around the store, and they had new books and old books. And this one particular book we see here is one of the first, probably one of the only grails that I actually purchased.
It's one of my favorites.
Well, you'd be surprised at the lack of grails that I have, and as long as I've been collecting, I just never seem to pull the trigger on anything. This one I watched for over a month. It was on the board behind the register. I think it was marked $300 or something like that. And this was in probably about 90, maybe 89.
That's a lot of money back then.
It was. This was, I think they had it marked as a VG, maybe a VG plus. And I did get it. I did clean it. It was one of the first books that I cleaned. I know people would say that's just nuts, right?
That is
But it was
nuts.
in so great condition. I mean, other than the missing piece at the top where Janet Pym is no longer an Avenger, she was pulled off.
Sure. Yeah.
The spine was great. It was basically, it was white pages,
Nice.
and it was a beautiful book. It had a little tear on the back cover, about half an inch or so, and so I cleaned it and just dry cleaning and pressing. There was no whitening at that point, but yeah, it was a beautiful book. I think I ended up selling it at auction for about $1,300.
I was just going to ask if you still had it.
No, I don't. I wish I did. But it was one of the ones that started me down the cleaning and pressing road. I needed funds. So it was,
Wow.
I was okay with parting with it at that time. I still am, along with a couple New Mutant 98. So that was a big,
That is still one of my all-time favorite Grail covers.
and the
Classic.
first page is just awesome when,
Yeah.
you see him running out, and it's, so anyway, but that
Well,
was
obviously
was one book.
Janet Van Dyne was a DEI hire, and somebody really needed to erase her from the corner box.
It's funny, Paul, but what I always say is that I will always know that's my book if I ever see it up for sale.
Oh yeah.
Because it's the only one I've ever seen with a a pull.
Specific defect. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
Probably a tape pull.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it looked probably a price sticker or something.
It might have been. Yeah, but it was. Other than that, it was in the tear on the back. It was a gorgeous book.
It is beautiful.
Well, go back again to this.
Sure.
So basically, with 94 was about beginning of 94 was the end for me. I remember actually going into a store, seeing some of the comics were there, and I actually turned. I think I turned to my wife. I was with somebody. I think it was her, and I said, "I'm done." And I literally said, I looked at the comics that were for sale, and I said, "This is like the dark ages of comics." I mean, DC and Marvel were talking about bankruptcy, and it was like, what are they even putting out anymore? I mean,
Superman
I
had a
looking at
mullet.
a copy of FF, and I was like, "This is trash."
You know what's
And-
so crazy? This is so relatable because I was a little kid coming up then, and I never put two and two together. When I hear all you guys talk about, my first book was an FF 150 or whatever
Right.
it was, like
Right.
in the superhero genre. When I was a little kid looking at new Batman and Superman and mainstream titles like that, none of it looked appealing. I read Scooby Doo and I went for Golden and Silver Age books because I knew
Yeah.
those were good. All of this stuff. It resonates so well with me when you said you couldn't stand what was coming out. Even as a little kid, I was looking at Liefeld and I was like, I don't get this. And then judgmental about artists. I just was like, this doesn't look. The Golden Age stuff seems cooler than that stuff. I don't know what the Image revival hadn't really happened in the early 2000s. So it was. I think you're right. The Dark Age was really there was some good stuff.
Right.
Like really, by and large, it was.
It's pretty bad.
Yeah.
I was in undergrad from 90 to 94, and I was penniless. So
Yeah.
I ducked out at a time when probably I didn't miss much.
You didn't.
So it was fortunate, right? Like I was penniless at a moment when there's not a lot that. Funny enough, I had a few friends who were still into comics. There was a comic shop on campus or just across the street at in Ann Arbor from University of Michigan, and they took me in when McFarlane was really big on Spider-Man, and they said, "You've got to buy a couple of these keys." And they were, at the time they were dollar comics, and they would sell them for $2 or $5, and that was a big deal because it was a big markup. But they said, "Well, just buy this and that," and I bought a few of those. Funny enough. So I had some of those keys, which I'm happy to have, but otherwise missed out on all of it.
Hey, Paul, I have about 15 X-Force number ones. Would you like any? I can hook you up with one. It's got a card in the back. It's kind of cool. It's in a bag.
I got a full run of Death's Head if you want those too.
I have 9 and 10 of the first one because of the things on the cover. So I do have Death's Head too. So
Funny. It wasn't Vault of Midnight, Jason. But the name's escaping me at the moment. If you have another name, throw it up. Sorry, let's move on.
Okay. Yep.
We have a lot to get to yet.
All right. So my reintroduction to comics was 2019. I was on YouTube one day and I came across Reggie Collect on YouTube, and I saw that he had a video about cleaning and pressing comics and getting them graded by a third-party company. And I'm like, what is this? I mean, I'm looking at 4,000 comics in boxes in my office, and I'm like, did I get anything in there that's worth anything? So I obviously remember the Avengers and a couple other books. I'm thinking this is probably pretty good price right now. And then eventually I was at looking for groups on Facebook, and I came across Captain Mike's group and joined that group. Started posting my stories of CPR projects that I was doing, and what I was doing with them, and eventually Mike asked me to be a moderator for the group because I had just responded to a lot of requests and just answered a lot of questions, and people were really grateful for the postings I was doing with the details. So I was appreciative of that as well, and that
Absolutely.
was a lot
Yeah,
of
I was
fun.
in that group at the time, and I remember, and I know I messaged you, and I said I really appreciate your posts. They're very detail oriented, and they just resonate with me. I had actually had some dialogues with some people who were trying to be helpful and just weren't, because I guess their brains were just not organized in a way. I would say, well, if it's a 15-minute press, is it 15 minutes? They would say, oh, I press for 15 minutes at 155. Well, do you preheat the press? No, I don't. Okay, so is it 15 minutes at 155?
Right.
Or is it 15 minutes total, and part of the heat up time is occurring during the 15 minutes? And the response from a very well-known presser who, again, was trying to help, his response was, I think you're overthinking it. And I was like, you know what? It's a pretty simple question. Like, is it at 150? I'm an engineer. I quantify things. Is it at 155 for 15 minutes because that's what you said? Or do you just put the dial at 155 and close it for 15 minutes?
Less of a science.
Yeah. Well, for some folks. For some
No,
folks,
no,
that's true.
Yeah. It reminds me, Paul, I actually did come across in a couple other groups on Facebook, and I sat in those groups for a little bit. And then when I saw some of the responses that they were getting back, I was like, it was total disrespect of the people asking questions. And you couldn't be a newbie, because if you asked the question, it was some, off the cuff nonsense answer that was belittling of the person that even asked the question. I was like, not the group for me. I would go.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're not.
I agree 100%. I experienced that. Yeah.
It was actually one of those groups that motivated me to start the comic book conservation community on Facebook. And the reason was somebody had posted to that group a conservation project. And they were belittled and told how stupid they were and told what they didn't know by people who, probably not that ironically, knew less than the person posting by a mile, right? They were like, you're a purple label. And no, you're not a purple label, and et cetera, right? So, Captain Mike has curated a group that is positive and helpful and welcoming to noobs, as well as very experienced folks. And so absolutely. Yep.
And in case you're wondering what the Spider-Man on the picture there, that's the first book that I did for a customer. And it was hopefully Rhett, you're out there somewhere listening or watching. This was in January of 2021. I think I'd been doing books for like 2 years of my own books. And he was a member of the group, and he hit me up on instant, direct message and said, could you help me out with this? Because, it was a mess. The book was had some stains on the back, and you can see some of the foxing if you look closely on the front cover in the top right and the bottom. And so I did the best I could for him, and I think he came back to 4 or 5, and he was happy with that because the stains on it were pretty extensive. But just pressing it and stuff, there was some water damage that was on there. It was more evident inside the front cover than it was on the front cover. But anyway, that was my first customer book, which I thought was, hey, let's just start with an ASM 129.
Is that an important book?
Somebody says it is. I thought it was actually. I read it and I was like, this really sucks. I mean, Jackal dude. I mean,
Well, the Jackal. I mean, that's an important character.
yeah, but he dies later. Don't worry about it.
Well, the X-Men aren't in it, so.
No, they're not. That's right. You can move on. Hey,
Here we go.
photo bleaching. I think we just read a book. We got a book about that, right?
Something like
Included in
that.
there.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, I had a happy accident. For those people out there that know who Bob Ross is.
I do.
Sorry, Larry, I'm bringing up all these old memories.
I know. It's okay. I'll just roll with it.
Yeah, this is actually it was May of 21, like it says, and it was Superman 243. I bought this because I love the cover. It's a Neil Adams cover, and it was part of the run where he was Superman was breaking the chains, and that book was a little too expensive. This one was a little more in my price range, but it was a white cover, and every one of these issues that I saw were badly stained. They all had off-white pages inside. This particular issue, probably this time period for DC Comics, the paper wasn't really good. It was tanning quite quickly. But in any event, I got this copy, and one of the things I noticed was that it had fingerprints. They weren't real dark, but there was one on the back cover, and there was, I think, 2 light ones on the front cover. And at the time, I was looking at alternatives to UV lighting for getting rid of stains. I was toying with stain removal at the time, and I was like, I just don't want to mess with UV because of the damage it can do, not only to the books, but also to humans. So I was like, it's got to be some other alternative. And that's when I'm thinking
So just to backfill a little bit and to zoom out, there were folks who were already putting peroxide on books and zapping them with ultraviolet light. And then we're
leaving them in the sunlight for half a day.
Right. Or sunlight, which has a lot of UV. And there were folks that were concerned about the results of that long term. And so that's the environment within which you were working on this project and problem.
Yep. So basically with this book, I was trying to think what other options are there. And my wife had just gotten the teeth whitening kit at the time, and I remembered that it was blue light. And I remember I actually had been at the dentist recently, and they were doing a cavity fill or something, and they were using blue light to cure the UV the resin on the tooth, because I think it was actually a crown. But I was thinking, with the teeth whitening kit, they use a blue light to basically catalyze the hydrogen peroxide and whiten your teeth. So I'm like, well, I got hydrogen peroxide, I got this blue light. Let's give it a shot. And just put a little bit on, take a cotton swab and just dab it a little bit and just put it on where the fingerprint spot was, and not enough to really soak the page, but just to put a little strip on there. And so I took the teeth whitening kit and I plugged it in, put it on top of the book, went away, and about 45 minutes later I came back. And I think I did one on the front cover first. It's to the right. I have some pictures coming up, you can see it, but and I came back and it was gone. No fingerprint. It was one of those fingerprints that was top of the cover. It wasn't embedded in. It didn't make itself into below the gloss. So it was
right.
Move. But I was shocked. I was like, did this just work? So I went ahead and did the darker one on the back cover, which was next to Frankenstein's head, and it was clearly a bigger one that it would have been caught by the graders. This one would have been caught too on the front cover because of the white cover was just kind of out there. But I think I should go to the next slide, Paul. I think that's the photographs. Yeah, there we go. So the one on the left is the front cover. You can barely see it. There's basically a kind of a half or quarter moon shape that's in the top of the left circle, a little way down, probably about a third of the way down. And then on the right side, it's completely gone. I think there was another one that was down below Superman's foot that was more visible when you hit it on on and the lighting was just right. You could see it. But if you go to the next slide, you'll see the one on the back cover, which is more evident.
Let's say thank you to Collecting Chaos for the super sticker. Thank you so much for your continued support. Appreciate you. Next episode, everybody, please thank Collecting Chaos, and next episode's on him.
That's great. Yeah, here's one on the back cover. So you can clearly see the fingerprint right there next to Frankenstein's head, and in the same location after the teeth whitening kit and some hydrogen peroxide. And that was probably full strength. I wasn't diluting anything. That was 3%.
3%. Sure.
So then I proceeded to press it. And Paul, if you want to go to full screen.
Sure.
This is the same book. You get the.
Oh, excellent.
So, 9/4.
That's a great cover.
Still no stain on by Frank's head now. It was right there.
Jason said she must work out.
Huh? Oh, yeah, she does, yeah. She was an alien.
She was an alien.
He was. Superman was visiting another planet. But
we
it's
know.
a great cover. I mean,
we know Neil Adams was.
Neil Adams, you can't go wrong.
He was a bottom man.
Master of the female form, as some people would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Jason also said, I can't help myself. He also said he tends to gravitate toward communities that gatekeep.
Well, Jason, we're going to have you on so you can explain what that means.
He's got my number with respect to these snarky comments.
Gotcha. Well, this was the next breakthrough for me was to find a light that really hit the wavelength needed for some effective whitening. So that was around June. I was flipping through Amazon pages, and I was actually talking to a friend that was mentioning, I think it was actually Gabe, was mentioning he had an aquarium that had different LED bulbs for the fish, and the coral, I think, was actually, this is if you shine blue light on it, I think the coral responds and grows a little quicker. If you shine it on plants, that it gets more green. The green leaves of the plants will grow. There's a different light. I think it's red light that it will do the flowers. So interestingly enough, but I found this bulb. I got one of them. I was working on Marvel Spotlight 32 for a friend, and it had some foxing spots and some red ink transfer on the back cover. I was more focused on the foxing spots because I think I was messing with it with the teeth whitening kit, and I was able to lighten some, with just some local application of peroxide. I was able to lighten some of the foxing before. So I did it on this book in a couple spots on the spine and in the back cover. But like I mentioned, there was also, it's Evel Knievel back cover. And it was had some red ink bleed. This is kind of a demonstration here. I think this was the special Marvel Special Edition, the first
Marvel special. It's actually Special Marvel Edition.
Special Marvel,
15.
yeah. So that was
a side story why I know that so well.
But this was
I bought a copy of that book for $1.
Oh,
and it was one of my best like sort of coup purchases, right? Found it in the back issue bins. It was worth way more than $1 when I found it. Put it in my collection. Years later, I was bragging about it, went to go find it, and I'm looking, I know it's Marvel Special Edition 15. I'm looking through all my Marvel books, Marvel Premiere, Marvel 2-in-1, Marvel Tales, what's going on, right? And I'm freaking out, where's this book? And I don't know how long it took me to figure out it's actually Special Marvel Edition 15. So it's in the S's, not the M's.
Yeah,
I'm unlikely to ever forget that again.
For those that know the history of Bled, this was I was using this about 6 inches away from the book. I was figuring I had to get it pretty close to get those stains out. So that's why it looks like the light is so close. Generally, we say 8 to 9 inches or so roughly, because you want the spectrum spread, to get the books. And this was obviously before anybody was considering 2 lights or 3 lights or 4 lights. Generally now when I do Bled, I have 4 lights. I don't have the cabinet like Larry does, but that's a great way to do it. But yeah, I use 4 lights for most of the work that I do with lead anymore.
I just went to LED arrays, flat arrays. I had 2 bulbs forever.
Yeah.
And I put them further away so that I have a more uniform.
Yeah.
Most people have seen it on the channel.
Yep. Good. You can move on. This is just another picture of using 2 lights. So basically, this was the point where I was like, okay. And I missed the part about Marvel Spotlight there too. The find for me on that was the red ink transfer, the red ink bleed.
The bleed through
totally removes it.
Yeah.
And I don't know how, to this day, I don't know what the science is behind it. I'm assuming that I read somewhere that the red ink was the last ink to sort of absorb and dry on a book. And oftentimes that was not fully dry when they were packaged, when they were put together. And oftentimes it's the ink from the inside of the cover or the first wrap that ends up transferring to the cover. Sometimes it could be a book that was placed next to it, but that was the thing for me was that I think it was 2 hours that I did I bled on that book, and it was completely gone and never came back. I mean, I think I have a picture in here. I think I showed it. It was a year later, no change. I saw it because I know the guy who owns the book. I saw it even a year after that, and it was 2 years later, and it was still no change.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever heard what kind of causes that to basically dry it up or get rid of it?
No, I've witnessed it. I have no idea the chemistry.
Do you mean why the
cause the
bled
red.
works on the bleed from the other side? Is that your
Yes.
question?
Yeah. Why is it? How does it remove the red ink bleed? Because I actually worked on a book using water and various methods to try to sort of, pull the ink out, but it worked, but not to this degree. I mean, this was basically don't touch the book, just put some blue light on it, and it's gone.
So here would be my guess. If you go back to what you learned about chromatography in like 8th grade science or whatever, when you put a dot on a piece of paper and then you put it in some water or something and it spread the dot out and you saw all the different elements.
Right.
What's happening with red ink would be my guess. It's got elements that are moving faster through the paper than other inks do. And that's why you see the bleed through of the red and you don't see it of others. I don't think it has anything to do with it was wet when it was dry or packed or anything.
But why does it come off when we hit it with the blue light?
I'm starting with the phenomenon. And then the reason why the bled works is the photons actually can penetrate the paper, as we know, right? And what they're doing is, so if you imagine you have a sheet of paper and it's coated and it's got ink on this side and it's got ink on this side, right?
Right.
The ink on this side has started to penetrate the paper and it starts to become visible from this side. So then you hit this side with your photons and these molecules here, these pigments here, get bleached out. And now it's like you have white between your 2 layers again. Because that layer in between is a piece of paper, right? It had these pigments that are traveling through it. Those pigments got bleached and knocked out. So now you sort of restore that opacity because now you only have red here now. The ones that were diffusing through have been bleached.
Right. And I will say to that point, Paul, is that red is obviously the first color, one of the first colors that goes away if you leave it under blue light too long.
Sure.
Red and yellow typically are the first.
Those chromophores get knocked out most easily.
You do have to keep an eye on it when you're doing that. But yeah, that was just, to me, that was like instantly cleaning a book that was just seemingly not cleanable.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned it at the top of the show, but this is a big deal. I say kind of was a big deal, but it still is, right? But when it dropped, when this was revealed to everybody, it really changed our hobby. It really did. It was a very significant impact on our hobby. I can remember talking to Matt Nelson about this, and he was trying to get out in front of it and wrap his brain around it. He wanted he wanted my input on what the science was behind this, whether or not it was damaging to books. And
Right.
you and I, Chris, have talked about this before. I did a video on it a long time ago, so obviously not everybody's seen it. But just very briefly, these wavelengths and this phenomenon were actually known in the paper conservation literature since the 70s, really going back before that, because photo bleaching had been done on paper for at least 1,000 years, actually. The entire time paper was being made in the Western tradition, photo bleaching was part of it. That said, I absolutely believe you that you sort of independently discovered this, right? And that you were the first to widely apply it to comic books. And then the group of folks, you're going to get into it here. And then I think, well, here in your text, you mentioned bringing it to Mike Sorensen, who's known as Captain Mike, adding Jim Wolgert, who's obviously a friend of the channel, to the team, and Joe Topsuski. And the four of you working through the details and really trying to bring it to us in a systematic way, a very conservative approach, because I know all of you really cherish the books and don't want to suggest to anybody anything that's going to make them look good today but damage them in a decade or longer. And so I just think the contribution was major. Again, I'm on records this, but not everybody's seen all my videos, so I just want to say it here. I'm on record saying the work that you guys put together is phenomenal. I've wanted to have you on the show for a long time. I'm really glad you could join us. You and I have talked about this before, and you later became aware that these wavelengths and this sort of treatment was in the paper conservation literature, but not in, you don't have a science background. It's not something you had access to or had accessed. So you guys collectively figured it out empirically. You did a great job. And, we do have in our book some recommendations for things we would do slightly differently based on the literature and the science behind it. But I recommend everybody, as a practical guide, start with the book. And then, again, there are a few things I do a little bit differently, but really kudos. And I just want to say again, for the record, what a monumental contribution this has been. Books that we just thought were never going to achieve certain grades are safely achieving certain grades. And I'm not going to go into this big time, but Robbie Joseph says, are blue lights harmful to the paper? Blue lights, like any lights, in excess can be harmful to paper. However, these wavelengths are very safe, and they have been demonstrated to not deteriorate paper in the time periods and the exposures and the intensities that Chris and the team recommended. As a matter of fact, those intensities are effective at removing stains and 100% safe for paper.
Yeah, Ben actually made a good point. Really, that's not the thing to think about. The thing to think about, and the thing that initially got me, because like I follow conservation pages on Instagram, and I've seen documents clean with blue lights before, but I never understood how it worked. But I remember when this first came out, I was skeptical solely because of the application of hydrogen peroxide, and I was like, this is confusing. I understand it can be used, but really it's so easy to overdo that aspect, and then that's when damage can really start to happen.
And when we said in the book, we were upfront and said, anything, if you overdo anything when it comes to cleaning comics, you're going to cause damage. No matter what, using an eraser will cause damage.
Absolutely.
And so it's, we tried to come up with guidelines, and we tried to be conservative with the times, and what we wanted to do was just come up with a repeatable, setup that somebody could use. I mean, you know, I had a lot of people come out, like, you know, Larry, you created a beautiful tower to do your books. A lot of people have done that. They've shared that on the web, but we wanted to produce something, give people something they could just create from something you could buy at the store.
Yeah.
You know, we did a tub and gave you some methods for creating, you know, a light bin, you know, for that, and gave you the bulbs and so here, you know, go do it. Follow these steps. Always be careful. Don't overdo it. And thankfully, a lot of people were able to accomplish that. Some people, you know, overdid it. They got carried away with the whitening, especially with the Silver Age books. And that's where CGC started getting a little testy about the whiteness of some of the pages, the covers that were coming, and rightfully so. They
Exactly
looked like they were restored. So,
yeah.
you know, we did our best to try to answer the questions for folks. And so, how did this happen? What are they looking for? And we tried to answer those questions as much as we could, as we understood it. We had no, you know, line to CGC to say, hey, what are you guys looking for? I mean, it came out later. You know, there were people that were saying, hey, you know, we talked to, you know, head graders and graders at CGC and other grading companies, and this is what they're looking for. And it's common sense stuff. You know, it's tide lines, it's differences in the color of the interior pages versus the cover, the interior cover of the book. And so it's, if you think about it and not get too caught up in the, hey, my book looks beautiful now, you realize what you did wrong. And most people end up admitting and say, I probably, you know, overdid it with the hydrogen peroxide or the number of hours. So
Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, I appreciate that, Paul. It was definitely something that we wanted to bring out to the rest of the world. I wasn't sure, you know, when I first saw this, I was like, is this something? Because I'm like, nobody's doing this with blue light. I mean, I did as much research as I do on the web. I found, you know, some of the articles, the papers you were talking about, the scientific papers of using it. What I eventually found was the blue LED wasn't created until I think 2006, and it was the three creators ended up getting the Nobel. No,
Wow.
Yeah, was it Nobel Prize on science for physics or something like that?
I'm not sure about that. I know that the papers I'm referring to from the 70s, it was a very sophisticated, expensive setup to get the wavelength here. Something that wouldn't be practical for home use for most folks.
I think it was three Japanese scientists that ended up coming up with creating the blue LED light, and that was
surprise me.
That's why it doesn't go back far.
Can I assume a question too that, like you said, 2005 or 2006 was when they first? So I mean, it's been 20 years now since then, which is like a relatively short period of time in the grand scheme, but enough time. I don't want to assume, but that the cost of them when they first came out was significantly greater, and the cost has come down so much that applications like this that people can do in their home is more readily available now within the last 5 to 10 years. So it's really just the timing of things and the technology coming out and accessibility that makes it possible. That's so cool. I never really thought of that. It's also, gotta say, it's so great because, like, Chris, I've heard your name, I've seen it in the book, I know of you, but to hear your origin and how this all came to be, I had no idea of. And it's in the same way where I remember when I saw Larry's video where he posted that the Ghost Rider 2 that you removed that stain from.
Oh yeah.
And it's so easy to jump to an emotional reaction about something without knowing someone's intentions about why things are being done and understanding that. And it's just like it's so great to have you on and hear all this, you know, and it's just like it's so easy. I know, Paul, you've brought this up and kind of alerted me to the idea of legacy techniques and how certain things are only done a certain way, and there's really no challenging, you know. So it's I'm excited, and it's cool to be doing this, and like it's weird because I was right on that precipice right before all this stuff came up, you know, in like 2017, 2018, 2019 when I first started. So it's just seeing so much in such a short period of time. It's exciting.
Thanks, Phil.
And
this is so cool.
You know what else is cool? He's not resting on his laurels.
Yeah, go ahead. And I mean, thank you for mentioning James and Mike and Joe. It was a coming together of minds, like minds at a time period when everybody was looking at stain removal for some reason or another. This is the Marvel Spotlight I mentioned to you. This is the back cover, so you can see clearly on Evils, right in the center of the book. Basically, you can see where it's pink, and then also down the lower left, you can also see where there's a little pink between the chopper and the rocket there.
Yep.
But basically, all gone.
Yep. And this is typically this would have been misted.
Yeah, probably, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
But today you probably just do a blood overlay, or maybe just even missed it. Just
But
enhance it.
this was just the
It's just light. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
just photo
this
bleaching.
was, I did not treat the the red ink bleed. There was some foxing that I did treat with peroxide, but at the same time, that was local.
just
treatment, so it
local
wasn't
spot
broken.
treating.
Yeah, and it just by happenstance, the red bleed was taken out just from the light.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah, I love that book. And this was just a picture of a year, pretty much a year later. A little hard to see with this size, but basically there was no change in the book where the where the red bleed was.
Yeah. It's essentially permanent.
Yeah, so far as I can see. This.
Yeah. To the extent that those same pigments can migrate over the next 40 years again, sure, they can. But the pigments that were there have been permanently bleached, and so to that extent, it's permanent.
Go ahead, Paul. And
Final CDC
because everybody loves to
grade.
know, they came back and I know.
This is the first bled book.
Yep,
That's awesome.
that was the first one.
You're not going to let that one go, right?
It's not mine. I did it for a friend who owns a local comic shop. So
Did you just
talking to
sell
him
it?
today. No, he got in his collection.
Oh, good.
Yeah. I was actually talking to you about it today. I was telling him I was going to mention it on the cast
cool.
tonight.
That's awesome. Well, maybe
He
it
was
should
looking
be
for it,
in a
couldn't find it.
Museum of Comic Book Conservation. It should be there.
I'll tell him that.
It
Sometime he
ought
has
to
give it
be.
up.
I mean, I don't know if we need a Museum of Comic Book Conservation, but if we ever get one, it ought to be there. I'll put it that way. And Jerry the Jitterbug's first Hulk 181 leaf cast.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Man.
I remember seeing that on his video. On his cast.
All right.
Good.
Well,
All
let's
right.
move on to our reveal. Everyone's been patient. I'm excited to talk about these new press boards from the Pressmaster.
Yeah. Who's the press master? Go ahead and flip the. So who's the press master? What is the press master? I'm the press master. That's just the brand name I came up with. Actually, I was trying to come up with. It's like, if you're going to sell something, you got to have a brand on it. Otherwise, no one remembers it. They'll forget it. So I had been toying with ideas of names, and that's what came to me. So let's go ahead and flip to the next slide. Okay. So I've been working with these for about 3 years, and you're probably like, why the heck have you waited so long to do something with this? But 3 years of pressing almost every book that I've done was done with one set of these boards, and I have probably 7 different sets that I just use and rotate. I hate to say I actually still use the first set that I made, and that kind of goes to the durability, but you do have to be careful with them. But in any event, they're factory coated on both sides with silicone. They are smooth and flat, much like you would expect a magazine backer board or a nice sheet of cardstock that we use today.
So let me zoom out for the viewers just a minute, Chris. So what we're talking about is a board that is stiff, much stiffer than like cardstock, even similar to like mat board, right?
Right.
So it's almost like a tray, and then but it's super slick coating, and as you mentioned, durable. And I guess you're going to talk about how they're used on the next slide, but just for orientation, these are thick and stiff. You can hold it just from the edge, and you can have a stack of stuff on it, like a tray.
Right. And I have some here I can show you in a little bit.
Yeah.
So you know, I figure people would be asking the question, are they really better? You know, basically what I say to folks is you can replace the backing board you use for the external stack, and you can pretty much replace the cardstock if you want, with the exception of maybe when you have high moisture to your books, because
Right.
it will be affected by moisture if you put it right next to, you know, like a wet stack or something like that on the.
Because it's more or less impervious to water, these
Yeah.
pressing boards. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, as long
if you use super high humidity, you need a path for that water to escape as
Right.
the book is heated and pressed.
Exactly.
But if you're not doing high humidity, then you don't need any external stack other
Right.
than the press board.
That's right. You still need your internal stack pages,
Of course.
but yeah, you can put this right up to the covers, and your presses will come out beautiful. So basically, this replaces, you know, that paper stock, and I usually use like a sheet of 24-pound paper, because it's got a nice smooth surface to it. Some of the 20-pound paper is a little rough. Not that I think it transfers to the book, but it has a nice feel to it. So, but I usually use that between the press board, the pressing boards, and if there's any kind of moisture that I put in, and that's just for being safe. I've done plenty of books without using it.
Mhm.
And oftentimes the final press I do, if I know I'm going to do more than one press, I'll do the final press with light moisture and the pressing boards without anything in between. But if I know I have to do a couple presses, I'll just keep a sheet of paper in between.
Mhm.
But one of the things I like about it, they cool down quickly. They are fairly warp resistant. Now, if you get any of the boards from me, you'll notice that there is some curvature to them. That flattens out as soon as you put it in the press. And I've actually, a lot of the boards that before I've sent them out, I actually heat them up to about 200 degrees in the press, on pretty high pressure, and just kind of give them a flattening before I send them out. But if it looks like it's curved, you'll see that what I do is I try to match up the sides. So when you put them together, the curves are in the same position, and then I mark the boards so you can actually match that up every time. That same setup.
Ben Stewart says, so no SRP.
Correct.
No
Well,
SRP.
the board's function is SRP, basically.
Correct. Yeah, they have the silicone layer that
Yeah.
SRP would give you, and a lot of people have been going away from SRP just because of the humidity, warping the SRP and transferring that to the page after it's been vaporized. So
Yeah, I rarely use SRP.
I stopped
tape
using it
anymore.
a few years ago for general pressing. I still have it around occasionally when I want to create kind of a vapor layer.
yeah,
But,
same here.
yeah.
Yeah, I usually use it for tack ironing most of the time at this point now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they, as Paul mentioned, they create a stable platform. When you have both pressing boards around your stack, you can reach in, grab the stack, and easily move it to your work surface, or wherever you're going to go. If you're going to go to the scanner or whatever and scan your book, it's a lot better than having a paper stack that and I can't tell you 2 or 3 times I've gotten to the scanner and just dropped that book.
Yeah, when you're manipulating that paper stack too, pages that you very carefully tucked to a certain level in the fold don't end up where they are. They move around. It's I actually typically I would use a sheet of aluminum 1/8 inch as a tray and put my stack on that. But Chris sent me a pair of these boards a few months back, and I immediately saw the advantages of them. I've been pressing with them pretty much exclusively, although I only have the one pair. So occasionally, if I'm pressing 2 things at a time, I found that I just got a smoother press immediately. I love that I'm not wasting so much paper in terms of all the external stack.
That's my big complaint. I waste a ton of paper.
It's a lot of paper that I don't have to waste anymore. And I don't have to use that aluminum sheet. I can use these boards to manipulate the book around. And
it's already sitting on them. You don't have to try to slide it in.
Exactly. You slide it in like you slide a pizza into a pizza oven, right?
Yep.
And it really just simplifies the workflow and gives a better result. Now, the picture you show here is obviously a really excellent press. It's not that you couldn't achieve that by the
Right.
previous methods, because obviously you
Sure.
can. What I found is I can achieve it more easily and more quickly
Right.
with the pressing board, where that might have taken me 2 or 3 presses by old techniques. It's 1, maybe 2 with the pressing board, A. And B, again, for me, not all that wasted paper. So the board pays for itself in a few months, I should say, I don't know, you could do the math,
Depends
but
on how many presses
I'm
you do.
sure it'd be like in 100 uses it paid for itself, I'm sure, maybe fewer, because of 4 backing boards. And even I wouldn't necessarily throw away my backing boards every single use, right? I wait till they're kind of warped and whatever. But so your mileage will vary, but regardless, the board will pay for itself for sure because of all the external stacking that you're not using now.
Correct. Okay. Go ahead, move on.
Next slide.
So these are just a couple of testimonials, a few testimonials that I've gotten from folks that I've sent the boards to try out. So I mean, you guys can read through those. I don't want to bog down the show, but there's a lot of people saying they're pretty happy with.
Yeah, this is not something you rush to market with. This is similar to the approach before. I know you had these in the hands of some folks that you trusted to give you feedback. And I know when you sent them to me, you said, I want to hear what you don't like about them, right? So these aren't cherry picked comments. One of the interesting things that I said to you is, I typically use a fair amount of humidity in my pressing. And I said, this seems like I would be concerned. And then I thought, my initial take was, these are probably great for people that don't use as much humidity. They just may not be for me. But I decided to use them, to try them. And actually, I was so impressed with the outcome that rather than say these boards aren't for me, but they're probably for a lot of other pressers, I actually said, I need to use less humidity so that I can use these boards more.
Right.
So that I think is quite a testimony, because I think, humidity is a tool that I've always used and very successfully. And to say, well, I'm going to give that tool up because this tool gives me so many more advantages, is my sort of testimonial. Knights of Old says, so better than Gerber fullbacks, definitely thicker and stiffer than Gerber fullbacks. Yep. Plus they have a perfectly smooth surface, like a SRP type non-stick surface.
Exactly. That's critical. Keep the
professor says, do you have a video demonstration for the boards?
Not yet. I was actually considering doing one this week, and time got away from me, so I didn't get a chance to do it, because I knew people would want to see how it, going in and coming out of the press. But sorry, I didn't have time to do it. Maybe some point in the future.
Yeah. So you're going to be offering them soon. Here I see you have available in various sizes to matching pressing needs. No doubt you have the website, sort of the space reserved, and you just don't have a commercial ordering type website built up yet. But you'll be doing that very soon.
Yep.
If people want them in the interim, I think you have.
I left my email, and the pricing and the size of the boards are listed as well. And I also did this chart today to sort of represent some of the different, comic sizes and magazine sizes that people would be pressing.
Sure.
So I decided to put this together. So basically, the green is obvious. The yellow is, you could use that board, but it gets on the point of being too large, and you can't really handle the book, because if you imagine having a small book and a large set of boards, you're not actually touching the book inside when you're trying to move it from place to place. You'll still get the same press that you would from a smaller set of boards, but you had to be careful, putting something small in such a large set of the pressing boards because of just moving it. And then red is just the size just doesn't permit it, or it's not recommended.
Sure. So we have some specific questions. Well, actually, before we
Okay.
get to specific questions,
Yep.
here is the email that people can email you at to order boards. Here's your
Yep.
pricing, and the sizes are on the previous slide here. So just pause there and then come to this slide here, pause here. You will have the website up soon. When the website is up, we will put a link in the description to the website, and I'll put a comment as well, just to make it easier for folks that don't want to dig through the description. I'll put a comment and I'll pin it to the top.
And I'll post it to my Instagram page as well.
Yeah, I think what we should do actually is, you have one there. We have several comments here about demonstrations, Chris. Why don't we just highlight you and let you
I'll
show folks, and I'll read off some of the specific questions here.
Okay. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah. So Steve G says, where can we order from? I think we answered those. Claudio Ippolito, welcome to the show, says, can you show us how they are used? And Ben Stewart says, specifically, how much humidity is okay to use? So why don't you just start off by sort of showing us how you would build a stack?
I don't have any books around, but basically, so you have two boards. You'll see these are the 10 by 13 board, which is pretty much the kind of the regular size for comics with enough border to do magazines. I have a smaller one for just modern comics to Silver Age that you can use if you have a small press, like a 12 by 12 press. You probably want to use a smaller board. But basically, you'll notice that you can see here. There's a letter there, P, that you match up to the same letter on the other side. So when you press these, you put your stack put this on the bottom, the first press board on the bottom. Put your book stack in here, and you put in the middle of the board, pressing board. Then you match up the same letter, and this is what gives you I don't know if you can see that. So basically, that's just me squeezing it together with just light pressure. And then you put that into the press, and you can do it, horizontal or vertical if you prefer to press your books vertical or horizontal, depending on if you want to do how you want to do the spine or how you want to face it. You can do that either way with these. It doesn't matter the orientation, and then you press it for your normal times and take it out, transfer it to wherever you want to go with it. And this is what Paul was saying, that these are flexible but rigid.
Yeah, the closest thing I can describe it to is if you've ever seen a piece of mat board that hasn't been cut out for a picture yet, like that thickness, that kind of sturdiness is kind of what we're talking about, except instead of the finish, these have a really smooth, basically non-stick finish. So I use it. If you've ever watched my channel and you've seen me build a stack on my aluminum tray, so I have my sheet of aluminum 1/8 inch thick. I put my external stack, which would be like 2 magazine backer boards, maybe a piece of 100-pound cardstock. So all that's gone. I just lay down this one sheet, the press board. That I build my internal buffering on my comic. I just set it on there. Then I set the top sheet in, open my press, slide it in, just like I said, just like you're sliding in a pizza into a pizza oven, close it and you're done. That's the use case. So I could do a video for it this week. It'd be easy.
Can I just make one side just observation? Yeah. So I'm assuming if you can lay the comic right up against it, right? And this is so informative because as I can easily say, hey, guess what I got right here? Thank you, Chris.
I want mine.
But I'm so used to my own technique, and I kind of it's nice to see this now before I started using them. But my question is, it sounds like you need to be a little more proactive in making sure the surface is always wiped clean, just in case there gets, something gets on there. So it's one of those considerations where if you're used to using magazine boards, you grab a fresh one from the stack, you don't need to wipe it down. It's fresh. Here, you just need to take that extra consideration.
Yeah. That's a good point, Phil. And I do include a sheet with all the boards that explains how to clean it. You basically just actually what I use are actually baby wipes they're mostly just water, and I would just take one, just go over the surface. You can see if there's any kind of, usually it's dirt. Sometimes you get an eraser piece or something in there if you were doing that with the book when you're cleaning it. It doesn't stick to the board, but it could be embedded in your comic. But
Sure.
They clean up rather easily. I don't even use soap. I just wipe it with the baby wipe and then dry it immediately, and you're fine. One thing I will say is I told James Walgert that don't put comic clean on it because it will take the surface off of the
That's good to know. Yeah, that's good to know.
That is good.
I
That
accidentally hit it with a cotton round with some comic clean on it. It took the surface off. So, so don't clean with it. I use these actually for a base when I'm doing tacking. I'm using the tack iron.
Sure.
I'll use it. And
that's great. Insulation and buffer. I've definitely put a bubble in my hobby mat before from too much heat. So that's great.
Yeah. The one thing you were talking about, Paul, do you use the metal board on the bottom? Do you use one on the top when you press?
It depends.
I do.
I do in my Chinese press because I know that it doesn't really distribute heat very well.
Right.
In my seal press, I tend not to.
Right.
I'll just put my paper buffer on top and close it because that has that big aluminum heat sink on top, and it has a really beautiful symmetric layout of a resistive heat element. I've taken those apart and I've seen it, so it's very uniform in heat distribution in the seal. In the Chinese sort of t-shirt press, I will usually put a sheet on top.
And that's exactly what I'd recommend is when I'm putting it in the t-shirt press, because of the way the sort of the curve goes through with the heating element, just to keep that sort of spaced out the heat. You
want a uniform sort of heat distribution.
Top plate and the bottom plate, and that just goes right on top of the. What I found is sometimes, depending on the curvature of these boards, they may stick. So you got to open the press slowly if you have it directly on top. I've gone to actually just taking a sheet of paper or cardstock and just laying it on top, so it doesn't stick to it, but it kind of just the pressure and the suction.
Sure.
It causes it to. But even when that's happened and the board's dropped on it, it's never harmed a book. Because if you use a wide enough board, it's not. There's no edges that are going to hurt it.
You just open your press really slowly.
Yeah, exactly. And you wait for it to.
Anytime
usually, if the press is cold, it won't do it.
Yeah, but you never want to rip your press open anyway, because just that suction effect.
It'll shoot all your parts out.
Drop all your stuff on it. So
exactly. So just to recap, if you have a seal or laminating heat press, I don't use a top plate on top of that. I just put this on top of the stack. I have I have a steel board on my seal. I also use aluminum boards for the bottom plate, just sitting on top of the pad on the laminating press, and then nothing on top. And I put, like I said, a sheet of paper on top of this. Put the seal down, and I press from there. But for the two t-shirt presses I have, I do use a plate for both.
Yeah, that's more inherent to the press and the heat distribution than it is to the boards.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with the boards. It's just make sure the heat is distributed. This is the 12 and a quarter by 14 and a half board, which basically this is like treasury sized. So if you have larger format books, like treasury sized and concert magazines and things like that.
I'm going to put.
You can also do open comics, and everything except for Golden Age, because some of the Golden Age books are a little wider.
I'm putting the sizes back up because there's quite a few questions about so 8 by 11 and a quarter for moderns. Magazine type size is 10 by 13.
Magazine comic, 10 by 13. And then treasury is the like 12 and a quarter by 14 and a half. So I
Right,
never-
that's what you have here. So if
that's-
somebody wanted a larger, if somebody has a 15 by 15 and they want something a little bit more like the pizza tray,
Right.
they would want a pair of the Treasury size.
Yeah, I did come out with another site because of the Golden Age. Some of the Golden Age books, I think, are up to, was it 7.5 inches?
They are. So the early Golden Age open is 15. You probably should have 15 and a quarter to 16 inches, actually. 15 and a half. 15 and a half will cover any Golden Age that I've ever seen opened all the way.
So I do have a version that's actually, I think it's 12 and a quarter by 16 and a half. So you have a little bit of border around that. I think
That's
right.
the XLGA
Okay.
open.
That's the XL.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
pretty much for Golden Age. Anybody, that'll cover all your Golden Age books, but it'll cover especially the larger ones when you want to have them flat, open.
So if you want to leaf cast a Golden Age page and then press it flat,
Right.
you get that, baby.
And that you have to email me on that because those I don't make those up beforehand. Those are kind of custom sized because they do take a little bit more of the.
Well, right now they have to email you on all of them, Chris.
Well, yes, that's correct. But as far as
Yeah,
I don't think I even priced it. Did I put the pricing up there for it? Did you flip to the pricing?
Yeah, it was up. Yeah.
Yeah, I did. Okay.
Yeah, pricing up.
So
That's
I
for
tried
a
to keep.
set.
Yes, that's for a set. That's for two pieces, two boards. And someone had asked me, I think James asked me, he goes, "Are you going to sell just single sheets?" And I'm like, maybe at some point. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, I can do single sheets, but if somebody damaged one, because if you hit it hard enough, you could bend a corner, or you could actually put some. If you actually wrote on top of it, like you put a piece of paper down, you wrote, and you were heavy enough, you could actually put imprint on it.
Sure.
I don't think it actually transfers the book to the book though, but I haven't tried pressing with them when that happens. So. Go ahead.
Question about thermal conductivity. So my guess is it's thermal conductivity about like paper, right?
Yeah. I've used. I don't think I've actually used a thermometer on one of the probes to see what the temperature was on the board itself, but it seems to keep a pretty stable temperature with what you have it set for. It doesn't change at all. I'd say it's pretty moderate, as far as that's concerned. It takes the heat. Like I said, I press them at 200. I know some old time pressers, I think, can use a 200 degree. This is Fahrenheit pressing.
Yeah, I wouldn't use it that high. I don't think.
But most people are somewhere between 140 and 165 or so.
Yeah.
And it easily handles that over and over.
Yeah, but the question here is about thermal conductivity. So thermal conductivity relative to metal is very low here. It's similar, JCP, think of it as a stack of paper, essentially, how a stack of paper would behave in terms of thermal conductivity. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it is paper in its essence with the silicone coating, just very stiff. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's if you put, some people used to use mat boards against their
John Suter.
That's fine. I mean,
John Suter taught me that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just the same person that that I was referencing to.
It works really well. Yeah, I mean, I prefer the aluminum sheet, but it works really well.
Just a couple more visuals. This is where we're going to put your name at some point. Shipping label here. This actually goes into a mailer bag, but this is just a carded sheet. The two boards are in here. This is the regular comic size, the small board as I call it. This is the 10 by 13 boards, something like this. This is just for extra protection and for just keeping soil away from the books. They're also I also put them in a poly bag.
Yeah.
This one inside. Put the boards in a poly bag inside the mailer. I'll show you here. So this is what you get when you order them. So you take it out of the poly bag.
Take it out of the poly bag. Make sure you don't catch Janet Van Dyne's face
Exactly.
on the way out.
And then you have the the instructions, which goes over typical use, how to use, cleaning, and cautions, which are basically we already talked about. One thing we didn't talk about is don't use your pressing boards against like the foam or the rubber bed that comes on your press.
Mm-hmm.
You want to have at least a plate on the bottom because of the flexibility of those pads could cause over time could cause damage to either the pad or the stacking board.
Yeah.
I haven't
I'm glad
actually
you said that.
used to press it,
That's a
but
good point.
it's just a caution that I
Sure.
don't think you could use it without it. Go ahead, Larry.
Cool.
No.
I think Phil was just saying, glad you
No,
said
that was, a full disclosure, and I just made a note here because I got to look more into it after. And Paul, I'd like to talk to you about it, but I'm still, my brain is still locked down on legacy methods for using aluminum or steel plates on the bottom of my press. I just still conventionally pull the book out, flip it, put it back in. Somehow, even though everyone else is like, we do it, we get good results, and it's
Right.
More efficient to do it that way. For some reason, I'm like, I'm still holding.
I actually leave mine in. I don't flip my books. I just I'm using aluminum plates, and
Right.
I just leave it in for a longer cycle at a slightly lower temperature, like maybe 140.
I really
And
need to start getting in the habit of
because
this. I really do.
because you're going to make a mess if you're flipping that book and it's still at that sensitive phase of its press.
I handle a lot of delicate books too, so really it's more, and I've never had an issue, but every time I open it up and I'm like, I'm pulling out, I'm trying to keep the sandwich that I made and all that kind of, I'm just like, well, there's got to be, and I know that there's a better way.
I put it in and leave it because I'm afraid of messing it up if I try it, and I have messed it up.
Makes sense.
Like where you catch a corner someplace that
Yep.
you don't see, then all of a sudden you see this dog-eared corner, and it's like, oh man.
Yeah.
Jason, never flip your books, Jason. I think that's just personal preference. I tend not to flip either. If I have to press something a second time, I'll let the whole thing cool and I'll press it a second time. And if I feel like the defects are on the other side, I'll put it in the other side on my second press. I don't, as a general rule, I don't flip books, but I'm also a hobbyist. If you're a pro and you're having to move through a lot of books, I'm not suggesting that my way is the best way. Everybody's got to work through their own processes. But that said, these boards are a great tool to have in your toolkit, and I think they will definitely give you better results. So I really appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate you putting them together. Appreciate all your contributions to the hobby, Chris. Appreciate you walking us through them and bringing them to the marketplace. And I hope folks will get them from you and try them out and give you some feedback.
Yeah. I'm going to definitely contact you, Chris. I want to try them out myself.
Great. And Phil, if you want to use the boards on the mat or on the pad, let me know. If something bends or breaks, I'll replace them for you. Just yours.
No, I appreciate that, but I more appreciate you.
I don't think it would actually hurt the board.
No, but it's
just me. It's just a caution. But
I understand the philosophy, and that's why I'm really glad that you made that point about it, because I really just needed to kind of break out of my own mindset about how I do things.
I mean, I would use a flat surface beneath them.
Yeah.
I think you're going to get better results.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
No, exactly. It makes sense.
Yeah. They're not meant to change anybody's philosophy on pressing. just meant to save you some paper weight.
Yeah.
And
if I can save on paper, I go through so much paper.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's just it's awful.
I'm a reduce, reuse, recycle guy. I use them as long as I can, and then I try to press them and see if I can use them again, and just it ends up being a lot of time and energy.
I feel like
these are printed on recycled.
I almost said that out loud because I knew that. Yeah, those are printed on sheets that you use to press books.
Exactly. Yeah.
I use those sheets. I make mail labels with them. They end up getting used. Not all of them, but as many as I can. Yeah. Phil?
It's nice to. I remember when I also had I don't know when it was. It had to have been sometime since this channel started. So within the last year, I was one of the people in the comments being like, no SRP paper. And I was like, all right, fine. I just need to, like, unless I'm working on something that, you have that feeling that you're like, I don't want anything to stick to it just in case.
Sure, yeah.
Yep.
Not a lot of humidity, but really it's like it's so nice I don't have to pull out my large sheets of SRP and do my cutting them and everything down to size. I just pull a 20-pound piece of copy paper and I'm just like, this is so much easier now.
But it's that one
It's
time where there's just slight amount of moisture in there and you don't use that SRP and that cover sticks to that piece of paper. Then you're done.
Yeah.
You got to be careful, but yeah, I rarely use it anymore.
Yeah,
it's just so crazy how there's certain things where you're like, well, this couldn't really be done that much more efficiently, could it? And it's like, actually, maybe
I don't do much modern books, but the new stuff out, it's got that waxy ink. It's a must to use SRP paper on. So
for sure.
Yeah. Not if you have the pressing boards.
Yeah. You can put them directly on the
quite a few 9/8 for modern books.
Perfect. Yeah.
Nice.
Well, we've been here a while, folks. I really appreciate you sticking with us. We still have quite a few people in the chat. I think.
Oh, I thought you were going to say we had more to talk about.
We had a great show. I'd like to wrap it up.
Can I say one thing, Paul?
Sure, please.
This actually goes back to something Larry said earlier. I actually had a case study that I was going to do on a ROM #1 that I got that had such terrible ink bleed that I bought it off of a friend at a convention. I said, I have to have this book because I have to correct it. It's a beautiful copy. I'll give you the short story. It came back in 9/8, but I removed the ink bleed from the back cover, and it was so bad you could clearly read the ink on the back cover.
Yeah.
So at some point, maybe I'll come back on the show and talk about that, or I'll just.
You're always welcome back. You're part of the family now.
Yeah.
And we'll call upon you to join us from time to time. And
Absolutely.
Anytime you have anything you want to talk about, just hit me up. Obviously, we're in the Facebook group regularly, and love to have you back on. Thank you for coming on. Thank you to my wonderful co-host. Thank you to all of the folks who joined in the chat today and hung out with us. Thank you especially to AG and Sales Boy Comics and Collecting Chaos. And I appreciate all of you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Until
next time, see you, everybody.
Take care of one another.
See you.